Unemployed and Afraid acknowledges the traditional owners of the land we have recorded this episode on and of the land where you, the listener, are tuning in from. We would like to pay our respects to elders past, present, and extend our respect to any First Nations, Aboriginal, and Torres Strait Islander people joining us today, acknowledging that this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Welcome to Unemployed and Afraid, a podcast that explores the glorious mess of building your own business with the people doing it. I'm your host and fellow business builder, Kim Curtin. Thank you for being here. Let's get into some good, honest, small business chat. Hello, listener. Let me tell you, the small business chat is going to be kicking off in this episode today. You're about to hear so much insightful sharing. Now, detailed and considered legals aren't always the first thing we think of when getting into a business, sometimes not even a few years in when things are going gangbusters. We take on a lot of roles, as you know, and sometimes, just sometimes, the less sexy or less urgent stuff gets pushed to the side. My guest today knows all about it. She's a small business owner, naturally. You are listening to Unemployed and Afraid after all, and we're all about those SME stories. And her business exists to support small business owners. Bloody love that. I'm chatting today to Heidi Warren, Director of Law by Design, all about realizing a glittering law career was less sparkly than you'd hoped, dropping your profession for something very different, only to pick it back up again as a business down the track, hitting go on a business as baby number 3, quote unquote, sleeps, the mental segmentation challenge that is running your own business, making the business that you'd like to see exist, even if it goes against the grain of your profession, responding to the market need after you've gotten started, stepping out from behind your brand in a way that suits you, and some priceless info on legals for small business owners, whether that's as a sole trader or as a company, selling a product or a service or a course. We're talking privacy policies, protection, insurances, and trademarking. It's good chat. It's actually very sexy. And so you're going to want to stick around for that. We're always here for you, listener, to inject some real feels and inspiring connection on the journey that is building a business to make sure you have what you need to keep going. Let's get into the chat. I'm here with Heidi Warren, commercial lawyer and director of Law by Design, who exists to make life easier for small, startup and growing businesses. Heidi, you are amongst friends here with an extensive law career that has taken her around the world. Heidi decided to turn her attention to the small business community who, if you're anything like me, often feel left out in the dark when it comes to legal responsibilities and where to go for help. Law by Design deliver advice that is fast, commercial, solutions-focused, and their pricing is transparent with legal templates available for key things we need in business like T&Cs and privacy policies, but specifically for things like selling digital products, managing social media clients, coaching businesses, and loads more. She is currently raising 3 kids under 4 while building her business. So Heidi, I imagine you know exactly the kind of chaos that small business builders are working within. And so we can't wait to hear your story. Welcome to Unemployed and Afraid.
Hi, Kim. Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Oh, it's so good to have you. And I want to learn a little bit more about the Heidi behind the law, besides your career. Tell me, how would your best friend describe you?
Well, I think that's probably best answered in 2 parts. As you mentioned, I spent a bit of time traveling, and I was living in London just before having kids. And my best friends from London would certainly describe me as adventurous, organised, go-getter. Fast forward, I'm back in Australia now, a few kids later, and my friends would describe me as completely disorganised, chaotic, tired. But I think the general theme probably across both is tenacious.
I can just imagine. I say this quite often, but knowing how intense the experience of building any kind of business is from myself, but also the pleasure I have of talking to so many incredible business owners, I genuinely have no idea how you do it with 3 kids under 4. So I'm very excited to hear about your journey and what your days look like. But let's go back a little bit. So touching on it there, some of your travel, some of your living overseas. So before building your own business in Law by Design, right back, who were you?
Oh gosh, who was I before law by design? Well, I guess I probably had a few phases of my life. I've always kind of known who I am. I've always known that I wanted to be a lawyer. And so I did law degree straight out of school, which was great. I then went and worked in a big firm in Brisbane, thinking I wanted to be that big career woman. I didn't want any kids. I just wanted to be this high powered, like, go get a lawyer. And then I lived that, like, the article clerk version of that life, or the trainee version of that life for a little bit, and realized that's exactly who I did not want to be. This tired, burnt out partner in a big law firm. So then I went in-house. I worked for a hotel company for quite a few years. I loved it, kind of really found my footing there. And then after a while, got probably itchy feet again. And then my husband and I, well, I say my husband and I decided and forced my husband to head on overseas. We went and lived in London for 6 years and worked in London, where I probably had a different iteration of myself. Like, I grew up on the Gold Coast. I had my early career on the Gold Coast. And I think when you live in a smaller town, like, you have a lot more expectations on who you are, who you should be, your family are around. So moving overseas was great because you didn't have any of those kind of expectations or responsibilities. So you really kind of get to discover who you are. And so basically who I was in that time was someone that very much enjoyed life, had fun, very adventurous, did lots of travels, but I also really enjoyed my career in London as well. I worked for PwC, which is a bit of a dirty word now, to be honest, but at the time, they were quite a good brand to work for. So I worked for PwC for many years and really kind of honed my skills as a lawyer. When you're working in a big firm like that, you're working with a lot of egos, and it's a really good place to mirror like who you are against these big, egocentric personalities in the firm. And probably by and large, what working overseas really showed me was the role of a female in a career-driven environment. In Australia, before that, I think as I was kind of being put through my paces in Australia, the females in power were very dogged. They were very determined, probably not very warm persons, just really had that attitude of I had to do the hard yards so everybody else does, which I just thought was normal. Then I went to London, worked with amazing women in really, really high positions that were just warm and wonderful and individual and uplifting. And it really was eye-opening because I was like, oh, I don't have to be this person who I really don't relate to this kind of that female in power kind of person, that matriarch personality. And that didn't resonate with me. And I found that really hard to kind of comprehend that this was the life that I was carving out for myself. So getting to London, seeing how you can be in a community of just uplifting women, you can be as individual as you like. You don't have to pretend to be this corporate, male head of everything. So I really then, I think that changed the shape of me and my outlook and in kind of my corporate environment quite a lot, which now coming back to Australia, I try very, very hard to bring that back into my everyday work here. I have a law firm, but it's a firm of one. So I don't have any employees, but I have lots and lots of clients. I have lots and lots of professional referrers that I work with. And I think the landscape's really shifting in terms of that female dynamic and that kind of community that we're building and empowering one another. And that is probably the number one driver of why I love my job and I love what I do, because just who I'm connected with and how we're uplifting one another.
I find it so interesting to hear stories of, I just knew that this is what I wanted to do. And I find it particularly interesting because at 38 now, with more types of roles or careers under my belt than I care to admit, like I genuinely think I've been 15 or 16 different things in my work life. And so I find it really personally interesting what the journey is like to innately know something that you're drawn to or meant for. And I'd love it if you could share with me, I guess, a little insight into that. How did you know that law was the thing for you?
Well, it probably was drummed into me by my parents because they were like, oh, God, you're such a good arguer. You should be a lawyer. And I heard that quite a lot, which probably is more a reflection on the kind of child I was more than anything else. But probably that kind of mindset I just took and I was like, yeah, actually, that sounds like a good idea. I like the concept of being a lawyer, having a glittering career. So I was like, yeah, okay, I will do that, and just kind of followed that path. But yeah, I think as I mentioned earlier, and probably many people go through this, no matter what path they choose. They go through the studies, they graduate their degree, they're super pumped, and then they kind of get into that real world environment, and they're like, is this what it's all about? But I think with me, I always had quite an entrepreneurial spirit. My dad was a really good businessman, a great entrepreneur, and I think I've taken a part of that from him. And as much as I do enjoy being a lawyer, but things I found quite challenging were how risk adverse you need to be. And I'm not naturally a risk adverse person. I'm quite out there and happy to give everything a go, professionally and personally. And I definitely found that kind of mentality of, well, no, we can't give them the advice that they kind of want to hear because we might get sued. We have to just give this super cautious advice and make everything, cross all the T's and dot all the I's to the nth degree so that we as the lawyers are not going to be sued and, we're protected. And I just found that really hard to deal with because I'm like, but we're saying all these things clients don't want to hear, and it's not helpful for anyone. And then we're billing them lots and lots of money for something they don't want to receive. So that, probably part of that is why I went in-house, and then now it's really kind of reflected in how I deliver my services. It's very much to the disgrace of the Law Society and my insurer, giving tons and tons of advice and pages that people don't want to receive. I'm just trying to get to the point, get the commercial decision and move on for the client.
That's so interesting. And I want to ask you a little bit about that advice from your partners that are helping you develop your business, because I think that's always interesting when outside forces try to tell you how to do something that comes naturally to you. But before I do, can you tell me about what triggered you to think of even going out on your own? What was the seed of this idea?
So as I mentioned, I was living in London, working over there, had a great career, but I was early 30s. And as you start thinking about that early 30s, oh gosh, I guess it's time to, do we want to have kids? And so we made the decision, my husband and I made the decision that we did want to have kids and we would move back to Australia to have a bit of family support, a classic Australian lifestyle for the kids. So we moved back when I was 8 months pregnant, and I knew coming home I was not going to find a job that in the law that I really wanted to work whilst having a family, and that would, be flexible enough for me to have a family, have a career. And I saw quite a few women burn out previously, so I really didn't want that. So I kind of had a little mini break, probably quite like you, Kim. I tried my hand at a few different things. I sold vintage rugs for a while, like random. I did a bit of commercial property management. But ultimately, I realized, actually, no, do you know what I love? I do love being a lawyer, and I want to start that passion back up in my life. So I was pregnant with my third child at this time, and I thought, oh gosh, babies just sleep all the time. I'll have tons of time on my hands when I have this third baby. I'll just start a law firm so that I can just do.
I don't have kids, and that sounds like a terrible idea.
Really terrible idea, but I'll just start this firm, and then I can just have, a few clients a week and just potter along in my own time, and it'll be great. So being the person that I am, I got this idea. Then I went through the process of setting up the firm, getting it all ready so that when my third baby was born, when I felt the time was right, then I could just press the button and then start working. Little did I know that 3 children is like 300 children, and that it was going to be a terrible idea to be running your own business, let alone a law firm with 3 small children. But I was knee deep in it, and I guess my nature is we're not turning back. I put myself in this now, and I'll see it through, which has been great. It's been so rewarding, but it's also been a lot. So, and I think probably, I'm sure a number of your listeners will resonate with the mess that is raising kids and running a business, and the chaos, as you like to say, which is kind of how I feel like I'm just living in the chaos now, but I also do love it. So it's great. And the flexibility, on one hand, running your own business is really flexible because, oh, well, look, I want to go and visit my grandma today. Well, great, I can do that. There's no one stopping me. But then I guess you mentally carry it with you. So there's no turning things off. It's always there. And that kind of mental segmenting is what I find the most difficult in running the firm and the family.
Yeah, I think that's a surprise for a lot of us. I think we know in theory that when it's your own thing, you probably are going to think about work a lot more. And I think I can certainly speak for myself where my previous career was my identity. I fully identified with what I did. I was in radio advertising and I was all about radio. I loved the industry. I was excited. I was excited by brands. I loved deadlines. I loved ideas, big ideas. It was just like my whole thing. All my best friends worked with me. And so I thought about it a lot. And I thought that I thought about work a lot too, because I would work long days. I would come home and I would talk about work more with my friends. And on the weekends when I would go out with my friends who I worked with, we would talk. And so I thought then that it was a lot of my life. But then stepping into a role of having your own business, I realized I wasn't even close to making it everything that I thought about, because you're exactly right. Even in the middle of the night, you sleep, it just never stops. And you try to take a break or a holiday and you have guilt and you have ideas that come up. You're like, shit, I've got to write this down. I've got to get this going. And it really is quite relentless when it's all on you, which is something I think that surprises us more than we would care to admit. Have there been any measures in place you've put for yourself to give your brain a little bit of a chance to breathe out when it comes to the business?
Like, yes and no. Like I know theoretically what these measures are. Do I adopt them in my everyday life? I'd like to say yes, but ultimately the answer is no, because my brain is going a million miles an hour and it's hard to put it down. I'm a manifesting generator, so I've got about 1,000 plates on the go at any one time, whether I see them through to fruition. So I think what I try to do though, because I've got my kids at home 2 days a week with me, so I try really hard to be present for them then. But I do find that difficult because there's always a client that wants something urgently, or you just got to send this one email, darling. And then half an hour later, they're like, Mummy, I'm still thirsty. I'm like, oh, yeah, okay. But that's kind of I really just need to focus on carving out that mental time in those 2 days that I don't have them. But otherwise, it's always there. And, when you're falling asleep at night and then you remember, oh gosh, I forgot about this email this client sent me a week ago, and then all of a sudden you're awake again and processing. So yeah, I'm definitely not someone with wise counsel on this behalf.
I love that you mentioned your human design as a manifesting generator. For anyone who doesn't lean into human design, give it a Google, give it a look, learn about it. I'm a fellow manifesting generator. And so now the vintage rugs makes a lot of sense to me. We do like to try our hands at different things and follow where the energy goes. I'm a little sad you're not still doing vintage rugs, because it's an area that I would like to invest in. I may still have to ask you about that at some point. But in terms of setting up your business in order to hit go, take me back to that space at that time. Did you have your operating model, your revenue model, your kind of vision for what the business would look like set firmly at that stage?
Not really. So it was a bit of a hybrid. I could have mentioned it before, but I thought it was going to be a bit too in-depth. So I'll go into it now. So when we moved back from London, my husband, who's also a lawyer, was like, oh, great, I'm never going to get a job in Australia on the Gold Coast where we live for what I want to do. So he was like, all right, I'm just going to start a firm. So he ended up getting a great job actually, with a property company who are based out of, they're global and based out of Singapore. So COVID was really kind to us because he's ended up with a really good job. However, before that, he kind of laid the foundations for the firm, because he was like, well, this is basically my idea later down the track was his idea in the earliest iteration. Like, I'm not going to find a job which is flexible for the family, so I'm going to have to start myself. So he we together came up with the concept of law by design. And the law by design part is it's not accidental. You need to think about getting your legals right and, being purposeful when you're starting a business. So we kind of set that up. He got all the branding guidelines all done, did all of the kind of regulatory stuff, and then just let it lapse because he ended up maintaining the job that he got during COVID, and he's still working for the firm So I then, maybe it must have been 2 years later, when I was like, oh, I'm just going to start my own firm. They're kind of the basis, the bones were there. So it was easy for me to then pick that up. But then obviously I had to do the website and tailor off, well, actually, what is my offering? What am I going to focus on? Who are my clients? Which is probably largely quite different to what my husband envisioned his firm would look like. I have a passion for small businesses. When I was working with PwC, I was lucky enough to work with a team that were focused on startups and kind of doing incubators. And I just loved it because when you're working with the big multinationals and you're, negotiating a contract, it's against somebody that is just, one of 100 or 1,000 or 5,000 people. And yes, they might be entirely self-motivated to do a good job to get a promotion, but they don't impassioned for the business. Whereas then I was introduced to this startup space and you're working with these really passionate people that are real awesome drive for their business. It's really thrilling and rewarding. So I loved that when I was in London and I thought, look, this is what I want to do when I get with Law by Design here. One, I like it. Two, I don't think the legal industry is really focused on small businesses traditionally. It's easy to have a big client who can send you lots and lots of work and you don't have to keep going out and winning lots of work. Hence why that's the model for general law firms. Whereas I wanted to kind of carve out a space that was more intentioned for small businesses, more affordable pricing. Like I mentioned, I don't give 10 pages of advice. I'll just get to the crux of the matter. We share a bit more of a kind of commercial risk on that front. So yeah, that's kind of where my intention came from with the business. But it was, I would say, maybe a quarter built, and then I just had to pick up the bones and run with it.
I'm still hung up on the vintage rugs, but no, I'll make this make sense. So don't worry about that. But I'm interested because, following a career in law and how that would have looked working for others and the process that you would have taken, things like setting up a website, doing the branding, figuring out how to sell yourself to your ideal customer, those sorts of elements don't sound as though they're a big part of your day-to-day. So I'm interested in those more unusual skills or soft skills that you had to employ then at that stage, how they felt to lean into if they weren't areas of comfort, and whether or not having these fun businesses that you picked up and put down in things like vintage rugs, did that give you a little bit of a leapfrog in terms of getting something out there, something new and different, and operating all of those elements that have to bring it all together?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I look back now and I go, yeah, actually it was a journey, and it was whether I was consciously or subconsciously aware or the universe guiding me, who knows. But doing the rugs, then I started just selling those in the markets. I created an Instagram account. I got a decent amount of following and I was just selling on that. And then I had to create a website. So I created my Shopify website and then kind of started, oh God, now I have to track. And initially I was tracking everything in Excel and doing all that stuff because you don't want to pay for some software. All the, the things where you don't want to invest any money and it ends up taking about 5 times as longer and you regret it completely. So the rugs was good because it really just showed me what it was to start and run a small business. And then I was doing that for probably 2 years. And then I picked up some commercial property management just because I was a bit more aligned with my skill set. That's when I really started learning how to use Xero and doing all the proper accounting. And so that more bookkeeping skills, which I never had before, was really, really good learning. And then by the time I got to Law by Design, I knew about how websites operated. I knew a bit about the marketing and focusing on who my target demographic is. And yeah, the accounting piece was a lot easier, although there's so much more. I think I was just playing with ideas with the other businesses, whereas this is obviously I'm much more passionate about it. So I give it all my full energy and attention and time. And there's so much more. Every day I'm like, oh, I need to add this link up to the website. And then I have to learn all about this. And then, okay, well now I'm doing an affiliate program and I need to do a portal. There's no end, is there? It's just one step after the other, maybe a step back, but we keep going forward and we keep charting our path.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of weird sideways steps in this process. But I agree with you that we sort of need to become the people capable of achieving the business and not step into that role of successful business owners straight away. And often it's those little lily pads that get us there, those things that we think are fun ideas that we're playing with, but that do give us some skills to move into the next space, And I think people underestimate how intense it is to learn Shopify, learn Xero. Like, what on earth do you code this? All of those elements of business that take so much time and headspace are just as important, but they're so under-celebrated and under-talked about because it's like, everyone just sees the end goal of the business, but it's about all of those tiny, tiny little things that we have to do that add up to becoming the person that's capable of achieving the business that they want to by having tried all these things.
Absolutely. And I think probably one thing I've learnt along the way is the value of outsourcing and knowing what is your lane and what is your skill set, and then getting the professionals to help you with the rest. And when you're first starting out, that's not an easy task because everything outsourcing costs money. And so you're like, well, no, I don't want to get a bookkeeper, or even no, I don't want to pay accounting software. So I'll just do it on a spreadsheet. And then slowly but surely you learn, actually, I am better off spending my time doing the thing I'm great at and getting the people that are great at their things to help me. And so that's definitely been a learning journey for me, but something I try and help out my clients with, because no one who's not a lawyer knows how to draft an indemnity clause. So that's why I'm here to help my clients in any way I can.
You mentioned the outsourcing financial pressure, which I couldn't agree with more. I have so many things I want to outsource right now, and I'm like, but is it finding that fine line between what can you afford and what do you take on and what's your time worth? And I think that's a big thing in and of itself to get used to in this business building game. I'm curious about how it felt for you to step into a space where the regular income wasn't coming in. You were responsible for all of these elements. It was up to you to source the clients. Just how that felt for you from a financial perspective and changing that level of safety.
Yeah, well, I guess I was really lucky in that respect. It's probably been the easiest part of the journey because I was effectively on maternity leave before I started Law by Design. So my husband certainly felt the unending thrill of being the sole breadwinner. And I was, obviously, I had a few things going on and I was making a little bit of income, but I wasn't focusing on anything full-time. And I certainly didn't have like my previous full-time lawyer salary. So that safety net kind of was already taken away, which is actually extremely helpful. I don't think I would have been brave enough to go out on my own and start my firm if I was working full-time for another firm or business. And it's probably something I would have mulled over forever and, kicked myself at the end. I didn't do it. So I was I was in a good place to kind of branch out without having to really worry, like if I failed, I failed. And it wasn't that tumultuous for our family.
So there's an element of your business that I find incredibly interesting, naturally because I'm obsessed with small business owners and the hell we have to go through and how we can help each other make it a little bit easier so that we can all be inspired to keep going and keep growing these things we're so passionate about. And so when I was researching your business, I was absolutely taken aback by the templates that you created. Templates for sorts of things that different types of businesses just need in terms of getting their legal sorted. So terms and conditions, privacy policies for specific businesses, you can go on there and just kind of grab and go. And I think that's a very cool business model. Was it always the plan or did it come later, sort of once you started getting things established?
Yeah, it definitely wasn't the plan. So my plan kind of, I guess, when I started out, having come from PwC, I was doing contract negotiations a lot. And I was also doing app software kind of development and launches, but a lot of contract negotiations. So that I was just in that mindset of, well, I'm going to be a lawyer for businesses and they will need me to negotiate their contracts for them. And I kind of modeled in the early stages the firm and all my pricing because I always really want to do transparent pricing. So I do everything on fixed fees primarily. So I was like, great, these are my services, lots of negotiating contracts for you, and these are my prices. And as I started picking up clients, I realized, actually, people, mostly the small businesses, they want me to prepare them a client contract or they want their website terms and conditions prepared. It wasn't so much that kind of bigger negotiation piece. So then I had to really pivot on what my service offering is to meet the market. And in doing that, then I started just for myself creating my own precedent template because I didn't have any when I first started, or the things that I did have were 40 pages, which I condensed now down to 4. So I was just really doing it for myself so that I could deliver my kind of custom services to my clients. And obviously the primary role of my or aim of the business is to support small businesses. And I also learned quite quickly that, gosh, no one has a huge budget for legal. No one wants to spend all their hard-earned cash on lawyers, like, period. So how can I still engineer the concept of the firm of being affordable for small businesses? How do I change that and pivot to meet the market? So that's when it's like, okay, well, if I use the templates that I basically already have and make them quite easy to use for other people, then I can just sell those online. And obviously for me, that's going to be a great passive income stream. So there's self-motivation there and self-interest for sure, but mostly it was really so that I could deliver affordable and quality legal services to small businesses. Because one thing I also worked out, doing a fixed fee model, I would end up spending so much more time on a matter than I would anticipate, because everything's always a little bit more complex. Like anything, you start out thinking it'll take you 5 minutes and it's 2 hours later. So I just kind of had to change up how I delivered my services, and the templates came out of that.
No, I think they're just wonderful. And I'm all here for that passive income as well. If you can do something well and do it once and let it work for you, and it works for other people, and it's accessible and it's instant and it's all those things, like, that just couldn't be a cooler thing to add into your business. I want to go back to the you, though, who is then launching this business. So both servicing clients as Law by Design and yourself, and then offering these templates and putting that offering out to market. How did that feel in terms of sharing your new endeavor with your network? How did you approach it? But also, what surprised you about the response from your network?
I guess initially I approached things by hiding behind my branding. Like, I obviously had a LinkedIn, so I went on LinkedIn and I was like, yeah, look, Law by Design guys. But I wasn't really marketing myself. I would market the business, and my Instagram, I would kind of post about the business. And I didn't feel comfortable, I guess, putting myself out there and doing all the stupid reels and memes that all my marketing people are telling me that I need to do. It's just not who my innate person is. So yeah, I just kind of used it as a shield, I guess, initially. And, it was fine. But one thing I have learned, and I have listened to others, that you've got to get out of your own way and you have to put yourself out there. And truly, what clients want, what I find my clients want, they want to be able to relate to you. They want to be able to deal with someone that's authentic, somebody that gets them. And to do that, and for me to relate to my clients, I now realize I can't just be behind a brand. I need to step out into the front and lead from the front and show people who I am. So it didn't feel comfortable at first, but now I've kind of seen the value in it, and I understand why people want to know who I am and, what I'm about before they're going to trust me and go down this path of kind of steering their business. So nobody really wants to do that with an unnamed face.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think so many of us do that. It's that sort of fear of being seen and fear of standing on our own when we've been part of companies and have had that ability to be somewhat self-identified by the places in which we work, that we hide behind the brand a little bit. But you're right, that personal branding is such a big part of the journey. I struggle to think of a business where the personal branding development of the people behind the business isn't important to prioritize just as much, because at the end of the day, people buy from people. They want to feel that they're in safe hands. They want to know that there's thought behind it and emotion and connectivity. We're all craving for that connection. So I can understand, though, that it's a challenging one to get used to.
Yeah, I think it comes from the fear of failure too. It's easy if you fail and it's just a business name, then it's just a business name. But you fail and it's your name, yourself, you're out there, then there's a lot more personal repercussions for that.
Absolutely. And I love that you touch on that in terms of failure, because I think about failure a lot, and I think about what would I do if I failed? And I think if we go a little bit further with that fear of failure and think about, how do you actually fail on this journey? What are the actual failures going to look like? Is it that we overinvest in a business and therefore we become broke and we have to find alternate employment? is that a failure? If we can still go back to work and we gave something a red hot go and we learned a whole lot of lessons, is that actually a failure? I think we over prioritize our sense of fear of failure, because really, in reality, if you play it out and you go all the way, what does it actually look like? It just ends in us having a go, and it ends in us having to rebuild, and it's not going to be nice. But certainly I think the only person that's going to judge us is going to be us. That whole, you got to be in the arena to have an opinion on people putting themselves out there. I fear of failure is a very normal thing, but failure I don't think is quite as bad as we often imagine it's going to be when we step out and getting started. And stopping doing something isn't a failure. Hey, you stopped the vintage rugs. Is that a failure? No. I did the same with my ceramics. I handmade and sold my line of ceramics, and it was really popular, but I walked away from it and left it because it wasn't scalable, and I didn't have the passion to continue making it a business. I love doing it, but making it a business took a little bit of the love out of it for me. It's not a failure. It's interesting, I think, that term, and getting used to it as we evolve as business owners.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think failure, it's more you learn the steps, like you said, the lily pads in your journey, and they're not failures, and they kind of the sum total is your whole path, and all the learnings that you've built and created along the way.
And they're so powerful. I just remember as well, can't remember the name of the human. So if she ever hears this, she'll be like, that's me. But I remember her finding a post on LinkedIn once that came up in my algorithm, landed in my feed, and it was a woman talking about her business. She had an apparel business, I think, in sort of t-shirts and things like that. And she's saying, after 2 years, I've closed my business because it was a huge failure, because this happened. And, it came in my feed because it was getting an element of virality. And I was like, so engaged in it, because I was like, oh, tell me more. Like what happened, And I was so interested in who she was and how she had taken this risk and how she had the courage to talk about what failed and what she was going to do next and how she was pivoting. And I was like, failure is such an opportunity to turn into growth as well, because I'm pretty sure since then I've seen her. I started following her because I was like, she's very cool. I probably reached out to her and said, do you want to be on my podcast? But since then, her profile has grown and has been massive, and, she's got a lot of followers, and it's probably opened a lot of doors. It's taken me a while to get comfortable with the idea, but I'm starting to really embrace the idea of failure. I'm like, okay, if I gloriously fail, how am I going to share that with the world and make it work for me? It's not the worst thing in the world. It's always just going to be an opportunity. It's something I'm spending far too long thinking about.
It's your entrepreneurial spirit right there.
Yeah, embracing it finally. So, I want to stay with your personal experiences as much as I possibly can, because that's 100% what we are here for, and want to hear about how it's been for you running and building your business. But it would also be remiss of me not to pick your mind on some business stuff because of your love and your leaning towards small business, and call it purely a selfish reason. Because when I was looking at your website and I'm like, what is this template pack here about these certain privacy policies and things like that? I was like, oh my God, what don't I have? And what kind of risk am I putting myself in at the moment, because I don't know what I'm supposed to have? And I imagine the listeners probably thinking the same thing. I think I copied some terms and conditions probably from somebody else's website and just whacked them on mine when I got started. So sorry for that.
You and like 90% of the small business community, don't worry.
A long tangent story is to say, can you talk to me and the listener a little bit about the things that we might need, like T&Cs, privacy policies, in the context of small business, just a little bit of insight as to what we should know and why it's important?
Yeah. Okay. So there's lots of elements, and without like freaking everyone out, I think small businesses generally, everyone starts out as a sole trader. By and large, like, okay, if you've got a bit of investment at the beginning, you might start a company, but that's expensive. So most people just go the cheap way of starting up as a sole trader. What being a sole trader means is that you are personally contracting with your clients. And look, that's fine. But the problem is if something goes wrong, and let's say you had a big night out, a big weekend out, and then it's Monday morning and you had your third coffee for the day and you just stuff something up. Whatever it might be, you do something that you don't normally do, it's wrong. Something goes out to the client or the customer, it's wrong. It causes them a loss. And that, let's say, like I had a client the other day, so she's manufacturing candles, and saying, okay, so let's think about what could go wrong in the business. Somehow, when you're in the manufacturing process, something gets mixed into the candle mixture that shouldn't be there. The candle goes out, it's accidentally highly flammable, somebody lights it up, hits a curtain, next minute, your house is burnt down. extreme example, but these are when things go wrong, like it's always a cacophony of things going wrong. As a sole trader, that person that house is burnt down will sue my client in their personal capacity. That means my client's house, if she doesn't have insurance, hopefully all sole traders and all businesses have insurance, but if you don't or your insurers don't pay it out, your personal assets are on the line. So your house, your shares, whatever you own, you may have to sell those to pay out whatever claim comes against you. So it's a little bit scary, but what we do in terms and conditions and client contracts and all these website T's and C's, everything, there's terms and contracts, documents. Lawyers love to, and it's the primary thing that we need to make sure is in all of our contracts in terms and conditions is a liability cap. And that cap puts a figure on how much your client or your customer can sue you for if something goes wrong. And without that specific wording in your contract or without a contract at all, then your client, your customer can sue you for an unlimited amount. So you could potentially be sued for, the reinstatement of the home and you've sold them a $10 candle. So this is exactly why you want your terms and conditions in there to protect you against when something invariably goes wrong. Same with a company. It's just if you have a company, then the company will be sued and it's the assets of the company that are on the line effectively, not your personal assets. So it's still very important to have, but particularly so as a sole trader, because every time you put your name out there in a client contract, you're putting your house or your family's income on the line. So I don't think people really appreciate that much. So one of the kind of key things of the terms and conditions is to protect that and put a reasonable limit on how much a customer can sue you for. And also protect your intellectual property is always a big one. And so I've got lots of clients that do online courses. And so if you've got an online course, you're spending so much time and effort developing these materials, and they're really valuable. Obviously, people are paying all this money to do your course. If you don't have terms and conditions that protect the intellectual property in those course materials, it's going to be a lot harder for you to stop someone from just taking them and then repurposing them as their own, starting up a course basically on the back of yours. So you've got so much value in the things that you're creating and putting out. So we need to make sure that they're protected in your terms and conditions. So I think if you're a e-commerce business, the number one thing is to get a set of T's and C's. There's lots of other important things in there, but really limiting your liability and protecting your intellectual property, in my mind, are the key ones. If you're a service-based business, then you've got a client contract, then the similar concepts just go into that contract. Privacy policies, particularly, anyone that has a website really should have a privacy policy. One, they keep you compliant with the law, obviously. There are certain small business exemptions. So at the moment, not everyone needs one, but what a privacy policy does do, it increases your trust rank with Google. So if Google sees that you have a website and you don't have terms and conditions and you don't have a privacy policy, it will push you down and give you a lower trust ranking score. So keeping aside the fact that you're going to be more legally compliant and protected and seen to be a more professional business by having these documents in place actually helps your SEOs and helps boost you on that business front as well.
Wow. I've just written down about 15 things that I need from that advice. So thank you. And that's incredibly interesting about Google's trust ranking for privacy policies and T&Cs. I didn't know that. And so many of us go to the hassle and sometimes expense of careful SEO crafting, getting GMB pages and making sure we're asking for reviews and things like that to help us rank higher. And then something as simple as a T&C and privacy policy can play a part in that just to help us get there or be our downfall in it. Something else I think about in small business a lot, said candle creator, might have a fantastic brand. And I think about trademarking. And I've spoken to a few people about this on this podcast who've been through a trademarking process and just the sheer expense of it and how intense it is. And I've also had people on this podcast who have started the trademarking process and then realized that they can't grow their business how they wanted to. So, for example, finding something not trademarked here, but trademarked in the US, which then meant that they couldn't go into the US under their hard-earned name. Is there a time that you find for most people when we should be starting to think about a trademarking process?
Yeah, look, I guess the ultimate time would be when you start, but that also comes down to costs and how much do you want to put towards it, because it's not a cheap process. And the more exposure you want or protection you want from your trademark, the more it costs you, because that's how IP Australia price it. And so it can be extremely expensive, but my number one advice for you, whether you're going to do a trademark or not, is when you're finding a business name, you're like, oh yeah, okay, I'm going to look up on, is the business name taken or the company name? Absolutely check IP Australia and check if there's a trademark that's similar to the name that you like. It doesn't have to be identical, because IP Australia, when looking at trademarking, look at what is similar or will cause confusion in the marketplace. So something, you might have like law by design. I've trademarked it, obviously. Somebody might try and trademark law my design. Well, they wouldn't be able to do that now because I've got law by design trademarked and it's too similar. Or law and designs, for example, would unlikely to be trademarked. So you need to go and check that trademark database, because I've had so many clients that have come to me that have said, well, I engaged a branding designer and we went through and we created this amazing business name and all my branding guidelines and all the, logos and everything. And we're now 2 years down the track and I find out that there was already my business name was already trademarked. And the difference, I guess, with ASIC, when you're registering a company with ASIC or your business name, they will look at exacts. So law my design might get through because it's different to law by design. Whereas the trademarking, there's an actual human that spends a lot of time looking at it and looking at the marketplace and what's similar. So they look at it with a much more wider lens. So things that you get through, you get your business name through and you think, great, I'm protected. You actually are not, unless you have that trademark. The trademark is that ultimate trump card. And you could have your business name, I could have registered law by design 10 years ago. And then if somebody else, and I hadn't trademarked it, and somebody else comes in and they apply for the trademark before me and it gets registered, then it's then very, very difficult for me to then go and have to apply to get that trademark removed from the register. So just because you have a business name or you have a company name doesn't mean you are the ultimate owner of that name. That's what the trademarking process is. So obviously, like I said, the sooner the better, but at least at a minimum, before you decide your name, double check that it's available as a trademark.
Thank you. That's really, really valuable. In small business, we have so much to think about, and particularly as solopreneurs or, just even with a couple of people on the team to help you, there are just so many elements of this. And as somebody who loves brands and what brands stand for, how they look, feel, how they communicate an idea to an audience, I know that will be my go-to place when I'm starting a new venture. And this sort of thing is something that I would think about way later. So this is very valuable. If anybody is like me in the same space, you kind of just run at something to stop and have a think about these sorts of elements. Thank you. That's fantastic. Back to your business though, and back to what you're building and everything that you've been through to get you here to this stage where you're able to service amazing small businesses and become an amazing small business yourself, still with these 3 small people running around at your ankles. Where do you hope to see your business grow to over the coming years?
Gosh, so initially I started it thinking I don't want to take over the world. I just want to, have a flexible job. Is essentially where I started. But as, I start seeing opportunities and then your mind starts going wild. So there's a few different ways I want to take the firm. What I would like to do in one part is kind of create a space where mums returning to work and lawyer mums, I should clarify, returning to work, they don't have to go to that full-time high-powered corporate role. I want to create kind of like an environment where they can come and essentially work as a contractor under my business, and they can build their own business within mine. They can work as flexibly as they like, and they kind of just come along for the ride and the journey with me, and help foster that environment for females returning to work. So that's kind of one aspect. The other is really focusing on kind of what's this knowledge and the intellectual property I kind of touched on before. What do I have that would be beneficial for the small business community? And so part of that is doing some courses and kind of putting out a bit more content in a more formulaic way. So I'd like to do that. I'm kind of exploring the idea of a membership at the moment. So I see businesses doing memberships, and they're like, it seem like such an amazing way to generate that sustaining income. Like I mentioned before, working in the small businesses, although I love it, but it is more like a churn and burn environment. So lots of clients turning over. So for me, so that I'm not so exhausted having to go out and doing all the business building activities, I'm like, how can I build a bit more of a sustainable client base? And I think a membership is a really great way to do that. I just need to figure out what on earth I would put in a membership. Why somebody's going to part with their hard-earned cash for that. So that's a bit of an iron in the fire. But it's just kind of really trying to take an internal look at, well, what have I got to offer and how can I package that up in a way that's helpful, meaningful, and good value for my ideal client base.
Such great vision. And these things are always explored one step at a time. I think it's nice to think, okay, so end goal could be some more sustaining revenue so that I can be empowered to help more people and feel, safe and supported myself. Okay, let me work backwards and figure out how I can do that. That's how all great ventures start. You start pulling one thread and then it leads to another, might end up a totally different way. Very much a gift to share your thinking, your journey, everything that's worked for you, what hasn't worked for you. Just sharing your small business vision and journey with me and the listener is such a gift. So thank you so much for taking the time to spend with me and the listener today to tell us a little bit about your small business journey. In return, how can the listener and I support you to grow and hit some of those goals?
Oh gosh, well, I do love a chat. I love to, help out. I'm happy to talk to people. I know everyone finds lawyers quite unapproachable, but I try very hard to be approachable. Send me a DM if you can, find me on Facebook. Send me an email. My website's around, so happy to chat. Definitely, and look at the templates. If you've got any questions about them, feel free to send me an email or, the contact me form just to say, look, I'm a bit confused. You've got too many. Help me figure out which is the right one. I'd be thrilled to do that. So just get in contact and we can work through however I can help. I'm definitely here to do that.
Fantastic. And I'm going to make sure to have the links to your website and socials in the show notes so that listener, you can go and get around, get in touch, check it all out and start putting TNCs and privacy policies and trademarking a little bit higher up the list on things to do and to explore. It has been so wonderful to have this chat with you today, Heidi. Thank you for spending the time with me.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me, Kim.
Thank you for listening to Unemployed and Afraid, the podcast for small business builders with your host, me, Kim Curtin. If you love it, you can say thanks with a star rating and a review. And of course, join the community on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Find us at Unemployed and Afraid wherever you're hanging out, and I'll see you there.